A long, long time ago, there lived an old man and an old woman. One day, the old man went to the mountains to cut grass, and the old woman went to the river to wash clothes. While she was washing, a great thing came tumbling and splashing down the stream. When the old woman saw it, she was very glad, and pulled it to her with a piece of bamboo that lay nearby. When she took it up and looked at it, she saw that it was a very large peach. She then quickly finished her washing and returned home, intending to give the peach to her old man to eat. When she cut the peach in two, out came a child from the large kernel. Seeing this, the old couple rejoiced, and named the child Momotaro, or Little Peachling, because he came out of a peach. As both the old people took good care of him, he grew and became strong and enterprising. So the old couple had their expectations raised, and took still more care on his education. Momotaro, finding that he was better than everybody in strength, determined to cross over to the island of the devils, take their riches, and come back. He at once consulted with the old man and the old woman about the matter, and got them to make him some dumplings. These he put in his pouch. Besides this, he made every kind of preparation for his journey to the island of the devils, and set out. Then first a dog came to the side of the way and said, "Momotaro, what have you there hanging at your belt?" He replied, "I have some of the very best Japanese millet dumplings." "Give me one, and I will go with you," said the dog. So Momotaro took a dumpling out of his pouch and gave it to the dog. Then a monkey came and got one the same way. A pheasant also came flying and said, "Give me a dumpling too, and I will go along with you." So all three went along with him. In no time, they arrived at the island of the devils, and at once broke through the front gate. Momotaro first, then his three followers. Here they met a great multitude of the devil's men who showed fight, but they pressed still inwards, and at last encountered the chief of the devils, named Akandoji. Then came the tug-of-war. Akandoji hit at Momotaro with an iron club, but Momotaro was ready for him, and dodged him cleverly. At last they grappled each other, and without difficulty Momotaro just crushed down Akandoji and tied him with a rope so tightly that he could not even move. All of this was done in a fair fight. After this, Akandoji, the chief of the devils, said he would surrender all his riches. "Out with your riches, then," said Momotaro, laughing. Having collected and ranged in order a great pile of precious things, Momotaro took them and set out for his home, rejoicing, as he marched bravely back, that, with the help of his three companions, to whom he attributed all his success, he had been able to so easily accomplish this task. Great was the joy of the old man and the old woman when Momotaro came back. He feasted everybody bountifully, told many stories of his adventure, displayed his riches, and at last became a leading man, a man of influence, very rich and honorable, a man to be very much congratulated indeed. How the moon became beautiful. The moon is very beautiful with his round, bright face, which shines with soft and gentle light on all the world of man. But once there was a time when he was not so beautiful as he is now. 6,000 years ago, the face of the moon became changed in a single night. Before that time, his face had been so dark and so gloomy that no one liked to look at him, and for this reason he was always very sad. One day he complained to the flowers and to the stars, for they were the only things that would ever look in his face. He said, "I do not like to be the moon. I wish I were a star or a flower. If I were a star, even the smallest one, some great general would care for me, but alas, I am only the moon and no one likes me. If I could only be a flower and grow in a garden where the beautiful earth women come, they would place me in their hair and praise my fragrance and my beauty. Or, if I could even grow in the wilderness where no one could see me, the birds would surely come and sing sweet songs for me. But I am only the moon, and no one honors me." The stars answered and said, "We cannot help you. We were born here, and we cannot leave our places. We never had anyone to help us. We do our duty, we work all the day, and twinkle in the dark night to make the skies more beautiful. But that is all we can do," they added, as they smiled coldly at the sorrowful moon. Then the flowers smiled sweetly and said, "We do not know how we can help you. We live always in one place, in a garden near the most beautiful maiden in all the world. As she is kind to everyone in trouble, we will tell her about you. We love her very much, and she loves us." Still the moon was sad. So one evening he went to see this beautiful maiden, and when he saw her, he loved her at once. He said, "Your face is very beautiful. I wish that you would come to me, and that my face would be as yours. Your motions are gentle and full of grace. Come with me, and we will be as one, and perfect. I know that even the worst people in all the world would have only to look at you, and they would love you. Tell me, how did you become so beautiful?" "I have always lived with those who were gentle and happy, and I believe that is the cause of beauty and goodness," answered the maiden. And so the moon went every night to see her. He knocked on her window, and she came. And when he saw how gentle and beautiful she was, his love grew stronger, and he wished more and more to be with her always. One day the girl said to her mother, "I would like to go to the moon and live always with him. Will you allow me to go?" Her mother thought so little of the question that she made no reply, and the maiden told her friends that she was going to be the moon's bride. In a few days she was gone. Her mother searched everywhere but could not find her, and one of the maiden's friends said, "She has gone with the moon, for he has asked her many times." A year and a year passed by, and the gentle and beautiful Earth Maiden did not return. Then the people said, "She has gone forever. She is with the moon." The face of the moon is very beautiful now. It is happy and bright, and gives a soft, gentle light to all the world. And there are those who say that the moon is now like the maiden, who was once the most beautiful of all Earth Maidens. The Forest Bride. There was once a farmer who had 3 sons. One day, when the boys were grown to manhood, he said to them, "My sons, it is high time that you were all married. Tomorrow I wish you to go out in search of brides." "But where shall we go?" the oldest son asked. "I have thought of that too," the father said. "Do each of you chop down a tree, and then take the direction of which the fallen tree points. I'm sure that each of you, if you go far enough in that direction, will find a suitable bride." So the next day the 3 sons chopped down trees. The eldest son's tree fell pointing north. "That suits me," he said, for he knew that to the north lay a farm where a very pretty girl lived. The tree of the second son, when it fell, pointed south. "That suits me," the second son declared, thinking of a girl that he had often danced with who lived on a farm to the south. The youngest son's tree, the youngest son's name was Vaco, when it fell, pointed straight to the forest. The older brothers laughed. "Vaco will have to go courting one of the wolf girls or one of the foxes." They meant by this that only animals lived in the forest, and they thought they were making a good joke at Vaco's expense. But Vaco said he was perfectly willing to take his chances and go where his tree pointed. The older brothers went gaily off and presented their suits to the 2 farmers whose daughters they admired. Vaco, too, started off with brave front, but after he had gone some distance in the forest, his courage began to ebb. "How can I find a bride," he asked himself, "in a place where there are no human creatures at all?" Just then he came to a little hut. He pushed open the door and went in. It was empty. To be sure, there was a little mouse sitting on the table, daintily combing her whiskers, but a mouse, of course, doesn't count. "There's nobody here," Vaco said aloud. The little mouse paused, and turning towards him, said reproachfully, "Why, Vaco, I'm here." "But you don't count, you're only a mouse." "Of course I count," the little mouse declared. "But tell me, what were you hoping to find?" "I was hoping to find a sweetheart," Vaco replied. The little mouse questioned him further, and Vaco told her the whole story of his brothers in the trees. "The 2 older ones are finding sweethearts easily enough," Vaco said, "but I don't see how I can off here in the forest, and it will shame me to have to go home and confess that I alone have failed." "See here, Vaco," the little mouse said. "Why don't you take me for your sweetheart?" Vaco laughed heartily. "But you're only a mouse. Who ever heard of a man having a mouse for a sweetheart?" The mouse shook her little head solemnly. "Take my word for it, Vaco. You could do much worse than have me for a sweetheart. Even if I'm only a mouse, I can love you and be true to you." She was a dear, dainty little mouse, and as she sat looking up at Vaco with her little paws under her chin and her bright little eyes sparkling, Vaco liked her more and more. Then she sang Vaco a pretty little song, and the song cheered him so much that he forgot his disappointment at not finding a human sweetheart. As he left her to go home, he said, "Very well, little mouse, I'll take you for my sweetheart." At that the mouse made little squeaks of delight, and she told him that she'd be true to him and wait for him no matter how long he was in returning. Well, the older brothers, when they got home, boasted loudly about their sweethearts. "Mine," said the oldest, "has the rosiest, reddest cheeks you've ever seen." "And mine," the second announced, "has long yellow hair." Vaco said nothing. "What's the matter, Vaco?" the older brothers asked him, laughing. "Has your sweetheart pretty pointed ears or sharp white teeth?" You see, they were still having a little joke about foxes and wolves. "You needn't laugh," Vaco said. "I've found a sweetheart. She's a gentle, dainty little thing gowned in velvet." "Gowned in velvet?" echoed the oldest brother with a frown. "Just like a princess," the second brother sneered. Yes, Vaco repeated, gowned in velvet like a princess, and when she sits up and sings to me, I'm perfectly happy. Huh, grunted the older brothers, not at all pleased that Vaco should have so grand a sweetheart. Well, said the old farmer after a few days, now I should like to know what those sweethearts of yours are able to do. Have them each bake me a loaf of bread so that I can see whether they're good housewives. Mine will be able to bake bread, I'm sure of that, the oldest brother declared boastfully. So will mine, chorused the second brother. Vaco was silent. What about the princess? They said with a laugh. Do you think the princess can bake bread? I don't know, Vaco answered truthfully. I'll have to ask her. Of course, he had no reason for supposing that the little mouse could bake bread, and by the time he reached the hut in the forest, he was feeling sad and discouraged. When he pushed open the door, he had found the little mouse, as before, seated on the table, daintily combing her whiskers. At sight of Vaco, she danced about with delight. I'm so glad to see you, she squeaked. I knew you would come back. Then, when she noticed that he was silent, she asked him what was the matter. Vaco told her, My father wants each of our sweethearts to bake him a loaf of bread. If I come home without a loaf, my brothers will laugh at me. You won't have to go home without a loaf, the little mouse said. I can bake bread. Vaco was much surprised at this. I never heard of a mouse that could bake bread. Well, I can, the little mouse insisted. With that, she began ringing a small silver bell. Instantly, there was the sound of hurrying footsteps, tiny scratchy footsteps. Hundreds of mice came running into the hut. The little princess mouse, sitting up very straight and dignified, said to them, Each of you go fetch me a grain of the finest wheat. All the mice scampered quickly away and soon returned one by one, each carrying a grain of the finest wheat. After that, it was no trick at all for the princess mouse to make a beautiful loaf of wheaten bread. The next day, the three brothers presented their father the loaves of their sweethearts' baking. The oldest one had a loaf of rye bread. Very good, the farmer said. For hard-working people like us, rye bread is good. The loaf the second son had was made of barley. Barley bread is also good, the farmer said. But when Vaco presented his loaf of beautiful wheaten bread, his father cried out, What? White bread? Vaco now must have a sweetheart of wealth. Of course, the older brother sneered. Didn't he tell us she was a princess? Say, Vaco, when a princess wants fine white flour, how does she get it? Vaco answered simply. She rings a little silver bell, and when her servants come in, she tells them to bring her grains of the finest wheat. At this, the older brothers nearly exploded with envy until their father had to reprove them. There, he said. Don't grudge the boy his good luck. Each girl has baked the loaf she knows how to make, and each in her own way will probably make a good wife. But before you bring them home to me, I want one further test of their skill in housewifery. Let them each send me a sample of their weaving. The older brothers were delighted at this, for they knew that their sweethearts were skillful weavers. We'll see how her ladyship fares this time, they said, sure in their hearts that Vaco's sweetheart, whoever she was, would not put them to shame with her weaving. Vaco, too, had serious doubts of the little mouse's ability at the loom. Who ever heard of a mouse that could weave? He said to himself, as he pushed open the door of the forest hut. Oh, there you are at last, the little mouse squeaked joyfully. She reached out her paws in welcome, and then in her excitement she began dancing about on the table. Are you really glad to see me, little mouse? Vaco asked. Indeed I am, the mouse declared. Am I not your sweetheart? I've been waiting for you and waiting, just wishing that you would return. Does your father want something more this time, Vaco? Yes, and I'm afraid it's something you can't give me, little mouse. Perhaps I can. Tell me what it is. It's a sample of your weaving. I don't believe you can weave. I've never heard of a mouse that could. Tut tut, said the mouse. Of course I can weave. It would be a strange thing if Vaco's sweetheart couldn't weave. She rang the little silver bell, and instantly there was the faint scratch-scratch of 100 little feet as mice came running in from all directions and sat up on their haunches, awaiting their princess's orders. Go, each of you, she said, and get me a fiber of flax, the finest there is. The mice went scurrying off, and soon they began returning, one by one, each bringing a fiber of flax. When they had spun the flax and carded it, the little mouse wove a beautiful piece of fine linen. It was so sheer that she was able, when she folded it, to put it into an empty nutshell. Here, Vaco, she said. Here in this little box is a sample of my weaving. I hope your father will like it. Vaco, when he got home, felt almost embarrassed, for he was sure that his sweetheart's weaving would shame his brothers. So at first he kept the nutshell hidden in his pocket. The sweetheart of the oldest brother had sent as a sample of her weaving a square of coarse cotton. Not very fine, the farmer said, but good enough. The second brother's sample was a square of cotton and linen mixed. A little better, the farmer said, nodding his head. Then he turned to Vaco. And you, Vaco, has your sweetheart not given you a sample of her weaving? Vago handed his father a nutshell, at sight of which his brothers burst out laughing. Vago's sweetheart gives him a nut when he asks for a sample of her weaving, they laughed. But their laughter died as the farmer opened the nutshell and began shaking out a great web of the finest linen. "Why, Vago, my boy," he cried, "how did your sweetheart get threads for so fine a web?" Vago answered modestly. She rang a little silver bell and ordered her servants to bring her in fibers of finest flax. They did so, and after they had spun the flax and carded it, my sweetheart wove the web. "Wonderful," gasped the farmer. "I've never known such a weaver. The other girls will be all right for farmers' wives, but Vago's sweetheart might just be a princess." "Well," concluded the farmer, "it's time that you all brought your sweethearts home. I want to see them with my own eyes, so suppose you bring them tomorrow." "She's a good little mouse, and I'm very fond of her," Vago thought to himself as he went out to the forest. "But my brothers will certainly laugh when they find out she's only a mouse. Well, I don't care if they do laugh. She's been a good little sweetheart to me, and I'm not going to be ashamed of her." So when he got to the hut, he told the little mouse at once that his father wanted to see her. The little mouse was greatly excited. "I must go in proper style," she said. She rang the little silver bell and ordered her coach. The coach, when it came, turned out to be an empty nutshell, and the 5 prancing steeds that were drawing it were 5 black mice. The little mouse seated herself in the coach with a coachman mouse on the box in front of her, and a footman mouse on the box behind her. "Oh, how my brothers will laugh," thought Vago. But he didn't laugh. He walked beside the coach and told the little mouse not to be frightened, that he would take good care of her. His father, he told her, was a gentle old man and would be kind to her. When they left the forest, they came to a river which was spanned by a footbridge. Just as Vago and the nutshell coach had reached the middle of the bridge, a man met them coming from the opposite direction. "Mercy me!" the man exclaimed as he caught sight of the strange little coach that was rolling alongside Vago. "What's that?" The man stooped down and looked, and then with a loud laugh he put out his foot and pushed the coach, the mouse, her servants, and her 5 prancing steeds all off the bridge and into the water below. "What have you done? What have you done?" Vago cried. "You've drowned my poor little sweetheart." The man, thinking Vago was crazy, hurried away. Vago, with tears in his eyes, looked down into the water. "You poor little mouse," he said, "how sorry am I that you were drowned. You were a faithful, loving sweetheart, and now that you are gone, I know how much I loved you." As he spoke, he saw a beautiful coach of gold, drawn by 5 glossy horses, up to the far bank of the river. A coachman in gold lace held the reins, and a footman in pointed cap sat up stiffly behind. The most beautiful girl in the world was seated in the coach. Her skin was as red as a berry and as white as snow. Her long golden hair gleamed with jewels, and she was dressed in pearly velvet. She beckoned to Vago, and when he came close, she said, "Won't you come sit beside me?" "Me?" Vago stammered, too dazed to think. The beautiful creature smiled. "You were not ashamed to have me for a sweetheart when I was a mouse," she said, "and surely now that I am a princess again, you won't desert me." "A mouse?" Vago gasped. "Were you the little mouse?" The princess nodded. "Yes, I was the little mouse under an evil enchantment, which could have never been broken if you had not taken me for a sweetheart, and if another human being had not drowned me. Now the enchantment is broken forever. So come, we will go to your father, and after he has given us his blessing, we will get married and go home to my kingdom." And that's exactly what they did. They drove at once to the farmer's house, and when Vago's father and his brother's sweethearts saw the princess's coach stopping at their gate, they all came out, bowing and scraping to see what such grand folk had won of them. "Father," Vago cried, "don't you know me?" The farmer stopped bowing long enough to look up. "Why, bless my soul," he cried, "it's our Vago." "Yes, father, I'm Vago, and this is the princess that I'm going to marry." "A princess, did you say, Vago? Mercy me, where did my boy find a princess?" "Out in the forest where my tree pointed." "Well, well, well," the farmer said, "where your tree pointed. I've always heard that was a good way to find a bride." The older brothers shook their head gloomily and muttered, "Just our luck. If only our trees had pointed to the forest, we, too, should have found princesses instead of plain country wenches." But they were wrong. It wasn't because his tree pointed to the forest that Vago got the princess. It was because he was so simple and good that he was kind even to a little mouse. Well, after they had got the farmer's blessing, they rode home to the princess's kingdom and were married. And they were happy as they should have been, for they were good and true to each other, and they loved each other dearly. Goody Two Shoes. In the reign of good Queen Bess, there was an honest, industrious countryman named Meanwhile, who, living under a hard landlord, was cruelly turned out of his little farm, which had enabled him to support a wife and 2 children, called Tommy and Marjorie. Care and misfortune soon shortened his days, and his wife, not long after, followed him to the grave. At her death, the two poor children were left in a sad plight, and had to make all sorts of shifts to keep themselves from starving. They were also without proper clothes to keep them warm, and as for shoes, they had not even 2 pairs between them. Tommy, who had to go about more than his sister, had a pair to himself, but little Marjorie for a long time wore but 1 shoe. But heaven had heard their dying mother's prayers, and had watched over and protected them. Relief was at hand, and better things were in store for them. It happened that Mr. Goodall, the clergyman of the parish, heard of their sad wandering sort of life, and so he sent for the 2 children, and kindly offered to shelter them until they could get regular work to do. Soon after this, a gentleman came from London on a visit, and no sooner did he hear the story of the orphans than he resolved to be their friend. The very first thing he did was to order a pair of shoes to be made for Marjorie, and he offered to take Tommy to London, promising to put him in a way to do well by going abroad. As these 2 children loved each other very dearly, Marjorie was in great trouble when the time came for her brother to start, and wept bitterly. But Tommy, in order to comfort her, promised he would not fail to come back to see her when he should return from foreign countries. After he was gone, Marjorie began to recover her usual cheerfulness, but what helped greatly to put her into good spirits was the pleasure she took in her new shoes. As soon as the old shoemaker brought them, she put them on and ran at once to the clergyman's wife, crying out with glee as she pointed to them, "2 shoes, ma'am! See, 2 shoes!" These words she kept on repeating to everybody she met, and so came to be called Goody Two Shoes. Now Marjorie was a thoughtful little girl, and was most anxious to learn to read and write. When Mr. Goodall saw this, he kindly taught her what she most wished to know, and in a short time she became a better scholar than any of the children who went to the village school. As soon as she found that this was the case, she thought she would try to teach such poor children, as she could not go to school. Now, since there were very few books then were printed, she thought she could get over the difficulty by cutting out of wood 6 sets of capital letters and 10 sets of lowercase letters. When, after much pains and trouble, she had finished all these wooden letters, she managed to borrow an old spelling book, and, with the help of this, she made her playmates set up the words she wished them to spell. One day, as Marjorie was coming home from the next village, she met with some wicked, idle boys who had tied a young raven to a staff, and were just going to throw stones at it. She offered at once to buy the raven for a penny, and this they agreed to. She then brought him home to the parsonage, and she gave him the name of Ralph. What a fine bird he was! Madge soon taught him to speak several words, and also to pick up letters, and even to spell a word or 2. Some years before Marjorie began to teach the poor cottagers' children, Sir Walter Weldon, a wealthy knight, had set up an elderly widow lady in a small school in the village. This gentlewoman was at length taken ill, and was no longer able to attend to her duties. When Sir Walter heard of this, he sent for Mr. Goodall, and asked him to look out for someone who would be able and willing to take Mrs. Gray's place as mistress of the school. The worthy clergyman could think of no one so well qualified for the task as Marjorie, who, though but young, was grave beyond her years, and was growing up to become a becoming maiden. And when he told his mind to the knight, Marjorie was at once chosen. Sir Walter built a larger schoolhouse for Marjorie's use, so that she could have all of her old pupils about her that liked to come, as well as the regular scholars. From this time, nobody called her Goody Two Shoes, but Mrs. Marjorie, and she was more and more liked and respected by her neighbors. Soon after Marjorie had become mistress of the school, she saved a dove from some cruel boys, and she called him Tom, in remembrance of her brother, now far away, and from whom she had heard no tidings. About this time a lamb had lost its dam, and its owner was about to have it killed. When Marjorie heard of this, she bought the lamb and brought it home. Some neighbors, finding how fond of such pets Marjorie was, presented her with a nice little playful dog named Jumper, and also with a skylark. Now, Master Ralph was a shrewd bird, and a bit of a wag, too. And then Will, the lamb, and Carol, the lark, made their appearance. The knowing fellow picked out the following verse, to the great amusement of everybody. "Early to bed and early to rise is the way to be healthy, wealthy, and wise." Mrs. Marjorie was ever on the lookout to be useful to her neighbors. Now a traveller from London had presented her with a new kind of instrument, a rough-looking barometer, by the help of which she could often guess correctly how the weather would be, a day or 2 beforehand. This caused a great talk about the country, and so provoked were the people of the distant villages of the better luck of the Moldwell folks, that they accused Mrs. Marjorie of being a witch, and sent old Nicky Noodle to go and tax her with it, and to scrape whatever evidence he could against her. When he saw her at her school door, with her raven on one shoulder and the dove on the other, the lark in her hand, and the lamb and little dog by her side, the sight took his breath away for a time, and he scampered off, crying out, "A witch!" She laughed at the simpleton's folly, and called him a conjurer for his pains. that the half-witted Nicky Noodle had got a warrant against her. At the meeting of the justices, before whom she was summoned to appear, many of her neighbors were present, ready to speak up for her character if needful. But it turned out that the charge made against her was nothing more than Nicky's idle tale that she was a witch. Nowadays it seems strange that such a thing could be, but in England, at that period, so fondly styled by some the good old times, many silly and wicked things were constantly being done, especially by the rich and powerful against the poor, such things as would not now be borne. It happened that, among the justices who met to hear this charge against Mrs. Marjorie, there was but one silly enough to think there was any ground for it. His name was Shallow, and it was he who had granted the warrant. But she soon silenced him when he kept repeating that she must be a witch to foretell the weather, besides harboring many strange creatures about her, by explaining the use of a weather glass. Fortunately, her patron, Sir Walter Weldon, was well acquainted with the use of the new instrument. When he had explained its nature to his foolish brother Justice, he turned the whole charge into ridicule, and gave Mrs. Marjorie such a high character that the justices not only released her at once, but gave her their public thanks for the good services she had done in their neighborhood. One of these gentlemen, Sir Edwell Lovell, who was a widower, fell ill and requested Mrs. Marjorie to take charge of his house and look after his dear children. Having taken counsel with her kind old friend the clergyman, she consented to this, and quite won Sir Edward's respect and admiration by her skill and tenderness in nursing him, and by the great care she took of his children. By the time that Sir Edward fully regained his health, he had become more and more attached to Mrs. Marjorie. It was not then to be wondered at all that when she talked of going back to her school, he would offer her his hand in marriage. This proposal took her quite by surprise, but she really loved Sir Edward, and her friends, Sir Walter and Mr. Goodall, advised her to accept him, telling her she would then be able to do many more good works than she had ever done before. All things having been settled, and the day fixed, the great folks and others in the neighborhood came in crowds to see the wedding, for glad they were that the one who had, ever since she was a child, been so deserving, was to be thus rewarded. Just as the bride and the bridegroom were about to enter the church, their friends assembled outside were busily engaged in watching the progress of a horseman, handsomely dressed and mounted, who was galloping up a distant slope to the church, as eagerly as if he wanted to get there before the marriage. This gentleman, so elegantly dressed, proved to be no other than Margaret's brother, our former acquaintance, little Tommy, just returned with great honor and profit from a distant foreign country. When they had recovered from this pleasant surprise, the loving couple returned to the altar and were married to the satisfaction of all present. After her happy marriage, Lady Lovell continued to practice all kinds of good, and took great pains in increasing and improving the school of which she had been the mistress, and placed there a poor but worthy scholar and his wife to preside over it. The Sagacious Monkey and the Boar. Long, long ago, there lived in the province of Shinshin in Japan a traveling monkey man who earned his living by taking round a monkey and showing off the animal's tricks. One evening the man came home in a very bad temper, and told his wife to send for the butcher the next morning. The wife was very bewildered and asked her husband, "Why do you wish for me to send to the butcher? It's no use taking that monkey around any longer. He's too old and forgets his tricks. I beat him with my stick all I know how, but he won't dance properly. I must now sell him to the butcher and make what money out of him I can. There is nothing else to be done." The woman felt very sorry for the poor little animal, and pleaded for her husband to spare the monkey, but her pleading was all in vain. The man was determined to sell him to the butcher. Now the monkey was in the next room, and overheard every word of the conversation. He soon understood that he was to be killed, and he said to himself, "Barbarous indeed is my master. Here I have served him faithfully for years, and instead of allowing me to end my days comfortably and in peace, he's going to let me be cut up by the butcher, and my poor body is to be roasted and stewed and eaten? Woe is me, what am I to do? Oh, a bright thought has struck me. There is, I know, a wild bear living in the forest nearby. I have often heard of his wisdom. Perhaps if I go to him and tell him the strait I am in, he will give me his counsel. I will go and try." There was no time to lose. The monkey slipped out of the house and ran as quickly as he could to the forest to find the boar. The boar was at home, and the monkey began his tale of woe at once. "Good Mr. Boar, I have heard of your excellent wisdom. I am in great trouble, and you alone can help me. I've grown old in the service of my master, and because I cannot dance properly, now he intends to sell me to the butcher. What do you advise me to do? I know how clever you are." The boar was pleased at the flattery and determined to help the monkey. He thought for a little while and then said, "Hasn't your master a baby?" "Oh, yes," said the monkey. "He has one infant son." "Doesn't it lie by the door in the morning when your mistress begins the work of the day?" "Well, I will come round early, and when I see my opportunity, I will seize the child and run off with it." "What then?" said the monkey. Why, the mother will be in a tremendous scare, and before your master and mistress know what to do, you must run after me and rescue the child and take it home safely to its parents. And you will see that when the butcher comes, they won't have the heart to sell you." The monkey thanked the boar many times and then went home. He did not sleep much that night, as you may imagine, for thinking of tomorrow. His life depended on whether the boar's plan succeeded or not. He was the first up, waiting anxiously for what was to happen. It seemed to him a very long time before his master's wife began to move about and opened the shutters to let the light of day in. Then all happened as the boar had planned. The mother placed her child near the porch as usual, while she tidied up the house and got her breakfast ready. The child was crooning happily in the morning sunlight, dabbing on the mats at the play of light and shadow. Suddenly there was a noise in the porch, and a loud cry from the child. The mother ran out from the kitchen to the spot, only just in time to see the boar disappearing through the gate with her child in its clutch. She flung out her hands with a loud cry of despair and rushed into the inner room where her husband was still sleeping soundly. He sat up and slowly rubbed his eyes, and crossly demanded what his wife was making all that noise about. But by the time that the man was aware of what had happened, and they both got outside the gate, the boar had gotten well away, but they saw the monkey running after the thief as hard as his legs would carry him. Both the man and the wife were moved to admiration at the plucky conduct of the sagacious monkey, and their gratitude knew no bounds when the faithful monkey brought the child safely back to their arms. "There," said the wife. "This is the animal you want to kill? If the monkey hadn't been here, we would have lost our child forever." "You are right, wife, for once," said the man as he carried the child into the house. "You may send the butcher back when he comes, and now give us all the good breakfast, and the monkey too." When the butcher arrived, he was sent away with an order for some boar's meat for the evening dinner, and the monkey was petted and lived the rest of his days in peace, nor did his master ever strike him again. The Selfish Giant. Every afternoon, as they were coming home from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are here," they cried to each other. One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had had to say, for his conversation was limited, and he had determined to return to his own castle. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. "My garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall all around it, and put up a notice board. "Trespassers will be prosecuted." He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high wall when their lessons were over, and talk about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again, and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. "Spring has forgotten this garden," they cried, "so we will live here all the year round." The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. "This is a delightful spot," he said. "We must ask the hail on a visit." So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice. "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming," said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. "I hope there will be a change in the weather." But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. "He is too selfish," she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind, the hail, the frost, and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in this garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. "I believe the spring has come at last," said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a hole in the wall the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms, and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene, only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and was wandering all around it crying bitterly. This poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could, but the boy was too tiny. The giant's heart melted as he looked out. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground for ever and ever." He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him, and took him gently in his hand, and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his 2 arms, and flung them around the giant's neck, and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring. "It is your garden now, little children," said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. "But where is your little companion?" he said, "the boy I put into the tree." "We don't know," answered the children. "He has gone away." "You must tell him to be sure and come here tomorrow," said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived, and had never seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved most was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend, and often spoke of him. "How I would like to see him," he used to say. Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair, and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. "I have many beautiful flowers," he said, "but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all." One morning he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep, and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly he rubbed his eyes in wonder, and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In great joy, and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and he said, "Who hath dared to wound thee?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on his feet. "Who hath dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him." "Nay," answered the child, "but these are the wounds of love." "Who art thou?" said the giant. And a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. The Elves and the Shoemaker. A shoemaker, by no fault of his own, had become so poor that at last he had nothing left but leather for 1 pair of shoes. So in the evening he cut out the shoes which he wished to begin to make the next morning, and as he had a good conscience, he lay down quietly in his bed, commended himself to God, and fell asleep. In the morning, after he had said his prayers, and was just going to sit down to work, the 2 shoes stood quite finished on his table. He was astounded, and knew not what to say to it. He took the shoes in his hands to observe them closer, and they were so neatly made that there was not 1 bad stitch in them, just as if they were intended as a masterpiece. Soon after, a buyer came in, and as the shoes pleased him so well, he paid more for them than was customary, and with the money the shoemaker was able to purchase leather for 2 pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night, and next morning was about to set to work with fresh courage, but he had no need to do so, for when he got up they were already made. And buyers also were not wanting, who gave him money enough to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. The following morning, too, he found the 4 pairs made, and so it went on constantly. What he cut out in the evening was finished by the morning, so that he soon had his honest independence again, and at last became a wealthy man. Now it befell that one evening, not long before Christmas, when the man had been cutting out, he said to his wife before going to bed, "Would thank you if we were to stay up tonight to see who it is that lends us this helping hand." The woman liked the idea and lighted a candle, and then they hid themselves in a corner of the room, behind some clothes which were hanging up there, and watched. When it was midnight, 2 pretty men came, sat down by the shoemaker's table, took all the work which was cut out before them, and began to stitch and sew and hammer so skillfully and so quickly with their little fingers that the shoemaker could not turn his eyes away for astonishment. They did not stop until all was done, and stood finished on the table, and they ran away quickly. Next morning the woman said, "These little men have made us rich, and we really must show them that we are grateful for it. They run about so, and have nothing on, and must be cold. I'll tell thee what I'll do. I will make them little shirts and coats, and vests and trousers, and knit both of them a pair of stockings. And do thou, too, make them 2 little pairs of shoes." The man said, "I shall be very glad to do it." And one night, when everything was ready, they laid their presents all together on the table, instead of the cut-out work, and then concealed themselves to see how the little men would behave. At midnight they came bounding in, and wanted to get to work at once. But as they did not find any leather cut out, and only the pretty little articles of clothing, they were at first astonished, and then they showed intense delight. They dressed themselves with the greatest rapidity, putting the pretty clothes on and singing, "Now we are boys so fine to see, why should we longer cobblers be?" Then they danced and skipped and leapt over the chairs and benches. At last they danced out of doors. From that time forth they came no more, but as long as the shoemaker lived, all went well with him, and all his undertakings prospered. A handful of clay. There was a handful of clay in the bank of a river. It was only common clay, coarse and heavy, but it had high thoughts of its own value, and wonderful dreams of the great place which it was to fill in the world when the time came for its virtues to be discovered. Overhead, in the spring sunshine, the trees whispered together of the glory which descended upon them when the delicate blossoms and leaves began to expand, and the forest glowed with fair, clear colors, as if the dust of thousands of rubies and emeralds were hanging in soft clouds above the earth. The flowers, surprised with the joy of beauty, bent their heads to one another as the wind caressed them, and said, "Sisters, how lovely you have become! You make the day bright." The river, glad of new strength, and rejoicing in the unison of all of its waters, murmured to the shores in music, telling of its release from icy fetters, its swift flight from the snow-clad mountains, and the mighty work to which it was hurrying, wheels of many mills to be turned, and great ships to be floated to the sea. Waiting blindly in its bed, the clay comforted itself with lofty hopes. "My time will come," it said. "I was not made to be hidden forever. Glory and beauty and honor are coming to me in due season." One day the clay felt itself taken from the place where it had waited so long. A flat blade of iron passed beneath it, and lifted it, and tossed it into a cart with other lumps of clay, and it was carried far away, as it seemed, over a rough and stony road. But it was not afraid, nor discouraged, for it said to itself, "This is necessary. The path to glory is always rugged. Now I am on my way to play a great part in the world." But the hard journey was nothing compared with the tribulation and distress that came after it. The clay was put into a trough, and mixed and beaten and stirred and trampled. It seemed almost unbearable, but there was consolation in the thought that something very fine and noble was certainly coming out of all of this trouble. The clay felt sure that, if it could only wait long enough, a wonderful reward was in store for it. Then it was put upon a swiftly turning wheel, and whirled around until it seemed as if it must fly into 1,000 pieces. A strange power pressed it and molded it, as it revolved, and through all the dizziness and pain it felt that it was taking a new form. Then an unknown hand put it into an oven, and the fires were kindled about it, fierce and penetrating, hotter than all the heats of the summer that had ever brooded upon the bank of the river. But through all, the clay held itself together, and endured its trials, in the confidence of a great future. Surely, it thought, I am intended for something very splendid, since such pains are taken with me. Perhaps I am fashioned for the ornament of a temple, or of a precious vase for the table of a king. At last the baking was finished. The clay was taken from the furnace and set down upon a board in the cool air under the blue sky. The tribulation was past. The reward was at hand. Close beside the board there was a pool of water, not very deep nor very clear, but calm enough to reflect, with impartial truth, every image that fell upon it. There, for the first time, as it was lifted from the board, the clay saw its new shape, the reward of all of its patience and pain, the consummation of its hopes. A common flower-pot, straight and stiff, red and ugly. And then it felt that it was not destined for a king's house, nor for a palace of art, because it was made without glory, or beauty, or honor. And it murmured against the unknown maker, saying, "Why hast thou made me thus?" Many days it passed in sullen discontent. Then it was filled with earth, and something, it knew not what, but something rough and brown and dead-looking, was thrust into the middle of the earth and covered over. The clay rebelled at this new disgrace. "This is the worst of all that has happened to me, to be filled with dirt and rubbish. Surely I'm a failure." But presently it was set in a greenhouse, where the sunlight fell warm upon it, and the water was sprinkled over it. And day by day as it waited, a change began to come to it. Something was stirring within it, a new hope. Still it was ignorant, and knew not what the new hope meant. One day the clay was lifted again from its place, and carried into a great church. Its dream was coming true after all. It had a fine part to play in the world. Glorious music flowed over it. It was surrounded with flowers. Still, it could not understand. So it whispered to another vessel of clay, like itself, close beside it, "Why have they set me here? Why do all of the people look toward us?" And the other vessel answered, "Do you not know? You are carrying a royal scepter of lilies. Their petals are white as snow, and the heart of them is like pure gold. The people look this way because the flower is the most wonderful in the world, and the root of it is in your heart." Then the clay was content, and silently thanked its maker, because, though just an earthen vessel, it held so great a treasure.